So my favorite run of wrestling ever for any company was 2015 to 2018 NXT. Papa H. He delivered. So I've made it no secret that I am a tremendous fan of AEW. I am. I can't run it, can't hide from it. I am. I have it as show y'all here. It's the background of my phone. So if you want to refer to me as an A drone, A dub drone, whatever, I accept that because I don't enjoy WWE, and I have picked a side here in a quote unquote wrestling war, and that's fine. But AEW is not my favorite run of wrestling ever. I love what I'm watching right now. I really do love it, and I think it's bigger, it's more successful, it's got a wider reach. But for my personal tastes, 2015 to 2016 NXT was just chef's kiss. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. The biggest event, and I didn't watch TakeOver London, and that was in 2015, so I was kind of, I guess it would be more accurate than to say 2016 to 2018 NXT, but I had been kind of watching the TV up to this point. I went back and I watched this, so I kind of was here, but I wasn't really into it. Let me see. Like TakeOver Respect, I didn't watch. So all right, it's fair to say I watched the entire build-up. So essentially, right after, I remember kind of starting to tune in when TakeOver London was starting, and then for TakeOver Dallas, I was all in. So okay, we'll say 2016 to 2018, that 2-year period. But I do acknowledge that the 2015 that I wasn't really watching is pretty much the same, and the quality is just as good. So Papa H gets my credit there. I started watching Raw and SmackDown, and as much as I enjoyed what I was seeing, and yeah, go ahead and lurk and play Valorant, dude. This is kind of what these are for. You listen to a podcast, you should be able to listen and enjoy it. But I liked what I was watching. It was really fun. But man, 3 hours on Monday, and then eventually became Tuesday, 2 hours, but then 2 hours on Friday. They were long shows. And they weren't always all great. So it was just kind of getting tiring. And I would also feel sad if I missed, because that was my wrestling for the week, And I have a tough time, like, while tuning for half a Raw. If I was going to sit down and watch it, again, I'm not like this anymore, but if I was going to sit down and watch it, well, I'm going to want to sit down and watch all of it. So that's what I ultimately ended up doing. But then I've discovered on the WWE Network this little program called NXT. And I'd always known about FCW, especially from my original run of fandom, which was in like the late 2000s. I just started I knew what FCW was. I knew what developmental was. I was just kind of getting into those like mark boards just a little bit right before I took like a really long break from like 2010, 9, 10 to like 15, like 5-year break. But it was actually less than an hour too. It was about 45 minutes, 50 minutes. There was this show that was really easy to watch that came on every single Wednesday, that featured new talent every single week, that had just easy to follow, do some storytelling. And I was hooked. That was my weekly wrestling destination. It was every single Wednesday. I tune in. It didn't matter to me that it wasn't live because it was just so tightly produced and made. I loved the environment. And again, I wasn't really as familiar with the concept of studio wrestling, which now I love. Like AEW Dark is one of my favorite shows. Impact Wrestling, I think, is great. I love the small. I love keeping TV kind of small to a point, at least certain parts of it. Because again, I love tuning into Dynamite and seeing the big crowds. But I think studio, like small venue wrestling for short matches and character development, I think that's, if you're going to have a wrestling promotion that has, more than one TV show, you should have a show like that. But that's all NXT was. because it was, again, just sort of it was another branch of WWE. So it sort of was just kind of filling that role, except it had its own roster and own championships and own stories and stuff. That hour every week became the easiest hour for me to watch. And the stories were good. Simple. About competitors competing and wanting to win. With things thrown on top of it. Of course, I think it's okay to have a little bells and whistles and spooky things, and that's okay. It really is okay, but this was professional wrestling. And I remember how much hope it gave me, because it was like, this is what the future is. Triple H, who I count me among the people that believe that he was going to be the heir apparent to all of WWE, that he was going to be Vince one day. As silly and as, not understanding of business and corporate culture as I was at the time, still not really, but enough to know that Triple H was never going to be the successor, ever. He just isn't. He's a wrestler. He's a wrestling guy. And I'm not really trying to knock him there. I'm just saying that that's how he seems like he's viewed by these corporate types, Just a wrestler, when he's putting on the best wrestling promotion in North America, and he did that for 2 years until AEW came around. And even when AEW came around, like, if they just let him keep doing what he was doing, it would have still, like, just been as good, if sometimes better. And this is where I want to get into my feelings on Triple H, because he's very easy to kind of poke fun at in that Mark sense. I hate using that word like that, but I can't think of a better one. That golden shovel, 4 out of 10 Triple H, which I don't agree with those assessments of Triple H. I think he's awesome. I think he's put on some of the best TV matches in North America, some of the better feuds, some of the better character work. Sure, I can agree that he was in a pretty advantageous position with who he was married to. That is what it is. It's who he married. They're still together. They seem like they really, really love each other. Like, as much as you want to say, quote unquote, slap the toe to the top or whatever, I mean, that's just who he loves. That's who he has children and a family with. And it happens to be Vince McMahon's daughter. But you see how much that fucking matters? Our boy Trips has to go to the hospital for a cardiac event, which I hope he's okay. He hasn't really been seen much publicly since that. And then, like, while he's laid up in the hospital, not really for the whole time, I am greatly exaggerating here, but pretty much undoes everything that he's ever done with NXT. Just completely does it, undoes it. With Braun Breaker winning the title last night, smashing his foot through the X, like, it just seems like he tore it all down when the guy wasn't there to defend it. And I see this sort of hate for Triple H kind of because of that. When isn't there a large body of work that shows that he wasn't like that? When he was given control. And I understand everything in the company goes through Vince, right? Vince could have come down and shut everything down in NXT and did it, but he didn't. You can tell that he didn't. His fingerprints were nowhere near the black and gold NXT product for the most part until they went live. When he was given the opportunity, Triple H was the apple of the wrestling fan's eye. Didn't Squared Circle send him a fucking fruit basket? And then all of a sudden they want to pretend like he was never that good when AEW comes into town. That's not fair. That's not fair at all. He did nothing but prove that he loves professional wrestling and he wants it to succeed. Triple H did nothing but prove that he loves wrestling. Ever. Anytime he was in a program. There's some shitty programs he was in. The Booker T one. That one sucked. Should have done that. Wrong guy won. You could have done everything. You know what I mean? Like, he's not going to be perfect. I understand that. The Reign of Terror. Some parts were good. And I don't like Goldberg, so I could give a fuck, if he did I like it, but like there's things you could point to, be like, okay, that was not great. But man, when you're in the industry for that long, like, people want to pretend everything Steve Austin did was perfect when he had a 5-year run at the top, which was white hot, incredible. So much so that he was able to get away with, brutalizing his wife without any real consequences there. That's the kind of power that a hot wrestler run by you. But what was he doing before that? He was the fucking ringmaster, and he was stunning Steve Austin. Again, all good stuff. I enjoyed the matches with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. If you go back and look at them, they're good. He was in the like most famous War Games match ever. He's good there. Stunning Steve Austin was good. And then he had this 5-year incredible run at the top, you know, where his knees were quote unquote mashed potatoes. So I feel like it's very subjective. But to sit here and try to spin the narrative that Triple H was never good, he only worked with people who are over, I don't believe that's a fair assessment.